Once again, it's time to revisit some cool British singles released in 1966. October 1966 was a particularly excellent month for singles. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some great British releases from October of that year.
10 years time ago, situations we really know.
The Yardbirds played a major role in the early development of psychedelic music, and this single is one of the most groundbreaking 45s of 1966.
Walking in a room, I see things that mean a lot to me.
The track, with its LSD-inspired lyrics and experimental orientation, was the group's first to feature the dual lead guitar lineup of Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. Disc magazine journalist Penny Valentine always had a good ear for music, and she usually gave the Yardbirds positive reviews. But Penny Valentine was never a big fan of psychedelia, and this early example of psychedelic music prompted her to give the song one of the most negative reviews she ever wrote.
I have had enough of this sort of excuse for music. It is not clever, it is not entertaining, and it is not informative. It is boring and pretentious. I'm tired of people like the Yardbirds thinking that this sort of thing is clever. And if I hear the word psychedelic mentioned, I will go nuts.
The B-side was another excellent song. That same month, the Yardbirds filmed their legendary appearance on the movie Blow Up, directed by Michelangelo Antonioni. The single seemed to go over the head of the record-buying public, and it peaked at number 43 in Britain. In the States, the single was released a month later, and it reached number 30 according to Billboard.
Went to college, studied art, to be an artist, make a start.
The Creation were one of the greatest mod bands of the 60s. And for a brief period of time, both fans and critics seemed to be convinced that the band was destined to become a huge success. But the group never seemed to take off, and Painter Man, which was their second single, became their only top 40 hit in Britain.
Painter man, who would be a painter man?
The song featured guitarist Eddie Phillips playing guitar with a violin bow at least 2 years before Jimmy Page started doing the same. Record Mirror wrote,
"That avant-garde pop group sound again, all droning and compulsive. We tipped the boys' last one and it just missed, but this could be a sizable hit. It's the story of a student's lament, and most distinctive on the instrumental side."
The B-side bared more than a passing resemblance to My Generation by The Who.
I can't get rid of you, no matter how I try. You're always around me, like a double O spy.
But it was a great pop art type of song that has become a big favorite among fans of The Creation.
Big bang pow, do it right now. Big bang pow.
The single peaked at number 36 in Britain, and it reached its highest chart position in Germany, where it peaked at number 8. Oddly enough, the song became a worldwide hit later in 1978, when it was covered by Boney M. October 1966 saw the release of one of the most aggressive and psychotic British singles of 1966. Him and the Others were formed in 1964, and this was the only single they ever issued. The record sold next to nothing when it was originally released, but this 45 has become a really valuable collector's item. An original copy of the single was recently sold for over £700. This is one of the many singles from 1966, whose B-side was better than the A-side, but the A-side was also a good song with a great gritty sound.
I won't go to Tommy anymore, 'cause I mean it. Get my message, I mean it.
As previously stated, the single went unnoticed, and it wasn't even reviewed by the press. Later in 1967, the group changed its name to The Hand.
The Cream take us up to news time at Annan Black. 22 in the front, 50 with the wrapping paper.
Cream released their debut single in October 1966. Prior to the release of their first 45, the group had been playing in clubs for 3 months, and there was a lot of hype surrounding the band. But the last thing people expected was this jazzy piano number as the band's debut single. And not surprisingly, both fans and critics were quite disappointed and confused. The single got mixed reviews in the press, with most journalists agreeing that the B-side was the highlight of the single. Disc magazine reported,
For fans of the Cream who cannot understand why the trio stooped to recording a pop song, here is a ridiculously simple explanation from lead guitarist Eric Clapton. Clapton said, "We want to make money. I've been working too hard for too little for too long, and I thought that it's time I did something about it. For about 3 years now, I've been working 7 nights a week for a low salary, which is obviously the wrong way to do it. So when we made wrapping paper, we didn't think it would harm the image. I don't think it's a betrayal of the fans because I don't think it's a bad pop record. If people have enough intelligence, they can accept pop records if they're good."
The single reached number 34. This was the second single by the Montanas, and it's yet another great freakbeat number from 1966. The highlight of the song was the hard fuzz guitar that dominated the track. The single received extensive radio play in pirate radio stations, but the Montanas never found significant success in Britain, and the single didn't chart. The band only achieved one moderate hit in 1967, when their song You've Got to Be Loved reached number 30 in the States.
I know this world is full of suffering and misery.
Another highlight from October 1966 was this single by a band called The Wolves.
I gonna survive, I'm gonna live and love you till I die.
The song, with its organ and fuzz guitar, was very reminiscent of the sort of material that garage bands from the States were releasing at the time. This is no coincidence considering that October 1966 saw the British release of American garage classics such as Psychotic Reaction by Count 5 and 96 Tears by Question Mark and the Mysterians. Record Mirror wrote,
It starts quite slowly, setting a scene for how life is suffering but live it up. That's the message. It's good and commercial, an outsider to clip.
The Wolves were formed in Wolverhampton in 1964, and this was the last single they ever released. Despite enjoying local popularity, the single meant nothing in the charts. But October 1966 also saw the release of some singles that became huge hits.
Give me some lovin'. Give me some lovin'. Every day.
October 1966 saw the release of one of the most popular songs by Spencer Davis and Company. The track, which was produced by Chris Blackwell and Jimmy Miller, became one of the biggest hits of 1966. The UK version of the single was quite different from the American version. The original UK version of the song featured a more stripped-down arrangement. But United Artists, who released the single in the States, demanded a different and more commercial mix. And as a result, producer Jimmy Miller overdubbed the track with more echo, added percussion, piano, backing vocals on the chorus, and a different vocal take from Stevie Winwood. Record Mirror wrote,
At first hearing, it's not the most catchy of Spen's releases, but it makes up for that by sheer persistence and drive. Great organ break by Stevie, who is also in excellently exciting vocal form. A trifle formless, but it will be an easy smash hit.
The single became a worldwide hit. It reached number 2 in Britain and number 7 in the States.
Monday morning feels so bad.
The Easy Beats hailed from Australia, where they had already scored several major hits in 1965. The group moved to the UK in July 1966, and this was the first single they recorded in Britain.
Gonna have a little
Be with my girl, she's so pretty.
The song, which was produced by Shel Talmy, became the band's biggest hit, and it's another huge classic from 1966. Apart from the memorable melody and chorus, the song featured a great guitar interplay between George Young and Harry Vanda. Of course, as most of you probably already know, George Young was the brother of ACDC members Angus and Malcolm Young. The song only got a few small reviews in the press when it was originally released. Record Mirror wrote,
Cleverly created instrumentally, and this could be different enough to get the Australian stars into the top 50. Good song as well, another one to keep an eye on.
The B-side was another good song with a tougher sound.
Made my bed, now I gotta lie in it. Seems instead like I'm gonna die in it.
The single became a huge hit. It reached number 6 in Britain, and it was also a top 10 hit in several European countries. Not surprisingly, the song reached number 1 in their native Australia, and the track was also a decent hit in the States, where it reached number 16 according to Billboard.
Now she's dancing, going through the movement, swaying to and fro. Body moving, bringing back the memory, thoughts of love ago.
Another band who scored a major hit in October 1966 was the Hollies. Stop 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 was a truly unconventional pop song influenced by Middle Eastern and Greek music. Penny Valentine wrote,
This is actually an extremely funny record about, of all things, a belly dancer's admirer. It's terribly well done with great banjo sounds and everyone very tongue-in-cheek. Of course, a big hit. It made me laugh, but I'm not personally knocked out by it. And unless of course you just happen to be a frustrated belly dancer, identification with the lyrics is a little hard.
The single became a worldwide hit, reaching the top 10 of the singles charts in 8 countries, including number 1 in Canada. The record reached number 2 in Britain and number 7 in the States. By October 1966, things were definitely starting to get psychedelic. The British press started using terms like psychedelia, and several magazines featured articles talking about new trendy words such as freak out or happening. The music was also clearly starting to shift to psychedelia, and this rare single by a group called Yem And The Yemen clearly indicates that things were changing. Not much is known about the group, but apparently, the band's lead singer was Bryn Yem, and the group also featured future Mott the Hoople member Dale Griffin on drums. The single only managed to get this small review from Record Mirror, and was largely ignored. And here's another single which proves that psychedelia was starting to take the music scene by storm. This single by Barry Mason was produced by ex-Yardbird Paul Samwell Smith. And the track, with its weird sound and doomy Gregorian chants, was very influenced by Yardbird songs such as Still I'm Sad or Turn Into Earth. Penny Valentine wrote,
It is staggering. It reminds me of pagodas and Buddhas. Of Still I'm Sad, of tall mountains, white mists, and dark despair. It makes me feel uneasy and miserable and very sad.
This single went pretty much unnoticed, but Barry Mason was one of the leading British songwriters of the 60s. His songwriting credits include huge hits such as Delilah, The Last Waltz, and Love Grows Where My Rosemary Goes. And his songs were recorded by artists such as Elvis Presley, Rod Stewart, and Barbra Streisand, among many others. Mason was appointed member of the Order of the British Empire in 2020 for services to music, and he passed away in 2021. Another single which pointed the way towards psychedelia and more way out and experimental material was this single by John's Children. John's Children are mostly remembered for being a band that featured future T-Rex leader Mark Bolan on guitar. But Bolan joined the band later in 1967, and this track still featured original guitarist Jeff McClellan. The group was famous for their flamboyant image and anarchic shows. They fought each other on stage, used fake blood and feathers, and they trashed their instruments. This was the band's debut single. Record Mirror wrote,
"This is so unusual that it just gets a tip. Broken intro over space-age instrumental sounds, but it's a rather patchy production thereafter. Maybe the slow opening will hold it back, but it deserves to do well for originality. Hard to describe, just play it."
The single didn't chart. October 1966 also saw the release of this excellent song by Manfred Mann. The single became the first top 10 hit to feature a mellotron. The success of the song inspired the Beatles to use the same mellotron flute sound later in 1967 for Strawberry Fields Forever. The tune tackled the subject of life in British middle-class suburbia, and Shel Talmy's production showcased a much more sophisticated production style than the band's previous singles. Record Mirror wrote,
"Definitely a big hit. Unusual Stevens Carter song about a girl about to marry a square sort of character. Very clever vocal arrangement and the melody is catchy enough to take it way up. Moments of falsetto and instrumentally different."
The single reached number 2 in Britain, where it was kept from reaching number 1 by the Beach Boys' Good Vibrations, and it also became a top 10 hit in several European countries. In the States, the song wasn't released as a single. The reason behind this was that a band called Herbie's People quickly recorded the song and released it as an A-side in the US.
Help me, girl, 'cause I'm going insane.
The Animals officially announced that they were breaking up in September 1966, and this was the first solo single by Eric Burdon.
Girl, have you ever been hungry? So hungry that you had to cry.
Record Mirror wrote,
"Either side of this could take off. Help Me is a jogging compulsive sort of beater with Eric selling with tremendous blues enthusiasm. The arrangement enhances the vocal lead."
The B-side, a cover of CC Rider, still featured the old lineup of the Animals. The song was originally recorded during the studio sessions for the Animals' last album Animalisms. The single reached number 14 in the UK and number 29 in the States.
The ocean's deep and the river's wide.
Herbal Mixture was formed by Groundhog's leader Tony McPhee in 1966. McPhee led this band between the first and second editions of the Groundhogs, and this was the first of 2 singles that they released in 1966. The sound of the band was lighter and more melodic than anything else McPhee ever did, drawing influences from early British mod and psychedelic influences. The single was poorly received and barely reviewed in the press, and Herbal Mixture called it quits in late 1967. Tony McPhee decided to return to his blues roots with a reformed lineup of the Groundhogs in 1968.
Especially for thee, in the fun trip to the town of Chris Farlow. Right on, baby.
Chris Farlow scored a number 1 hit during the summer of 1966 with his cover of Out of Time by the Rolling Stones. And his follow-up single was yet another Jagger Richards composition from the Aftermath album. Just like his previous single, the track was produced by Mick Jagger, and it was an excellent soul-based adaptation of the song. Penny Valentine wrote,
I am very, very pleased about this record. I am pleased because it's going to give Chris Farlow another huge hit, and he is a nice person. I am pleased because he's singing in that bitter growling voice of his, better than ever. I am pleased because Mick Jagger has done a really excellent production job on this, with pipes and crashing backing. It is the only possible follow-up to Out of Time, and what a great title.
The single reached number 7 in Britain.
Stand up straight, look the world right in the eye. Comb your hair, say goodbye, go on out.
Future 10cc member Graham Gouldman wrote plenty of hits for bands like the Yardbirds, the Hollies, and Herman's Hermits. But oddly enough, none of the singles he released with his own band, the Mockingbirds, managed to chart. Probably due to its appearance on the second Nuggets box set several years ago, this track has become one of the most well-known songs by the Mockingbirds. Penny Valentine wrote,
The Mockingbirds always turn up with something unusual. And How to Find a Lover is no exception. The tune stops and goes and it's all enthralling.
Just like all their previous 45s, the single didn't chart.
21 in the Fun 50, these are the creations. Painter Man. 6 minutes past 8.
I hope you enjoyed this trip back to October 1966. See you next time.